the Cerritos College Visual and Cultural Studies program. We're so pleased to have AJ Girard coming to join us, to be in conversation with us, and to tell us about not only his experiences at Cerritos College, but his journeys after Cerritos College and what he's doing now. And we're just so happy to reconnect with him back into the Cerritos College family. We're so glad to see so many of you here. Welcome, welcome. I see students, I see faculty members that AJ worked with. So we're so glad that you're here. Let me introduce you properly, AJ. So AJ is an independent curator and cultural strategist. He is passionate about arts and social change. He has worked with the Broad Museum, the California African American Museum, and most recently the Underground Museum. His work in the museum field has garnered support from institutions such as the American Alliance of Museums and the Western Arts Foundation, where he was recently recognized as an emerging leader of color. He holds a BA in art history from Howard University and is based in Southern California. His exhibition Shattered Glass, which was co-curated with Bellan Frierson, featured 40 international artists of color exploring questions of power, surveillance, and justice, and it received great critical acclaim at Jeffrey Deutsch projects in Los Angeles. So we were so excited to see the article about that featured in a number of newspapers, including the LA Times and the New York Times. Mostly we remember AJ as just this amazingly enthusiastic student at Cerritos College. And so we're so glad to see your great success. So AJ, is there anything you want to say just to start? Just to
hey, professors, that's like all my professors are here.
Yay!
So it feels
so
like
good to see you, AJ.
As well. The beard looks great.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be back. I'm just full of big smiles because we were talking about it a little bit, but it just feels all so confirming and affirming. So thank you guys, everyone in this who has definitely dealt with me and my journey before any of that like listing was real. So appreciate all of you so much. Yeah, and then hey students, welcome. Hey guys, wherever you are in a virtual reality. Happy to be here, but yeah.
All right, well, great. Well, welcome again, AJ, and we're so glad to have you here. So starting off, could you just speak a little bit about your time at Cerritos and how did you end up coming to Cerritos, and how would you describe its role in your educational journey? Because obviously you were at Howard, and so what role do you feel like Cerritos played in your educational journey?
Yeah, and I'm gonna definitely try to get through this part of it without recurring emotional like memories, because I have to be honest, when I first came to Cerritos, I had just lost a parent, and it was so cause I'm from Texas, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit, but I came to Cerritos just in this like space where I needed to stay motivated as things were like kind of getting more honest and real around me in my life. And I came to the class and the campus, I think just wanting to continue my education, knowing that I had really much more to say, but I didn't have the access to saying them or learning. And I specifically remember how I knew it was art history, but it was like the art history classes were the only thing keeping me sane. And so I pretty much ate all of those classes first, where other people would use those as electives. I remember being like adamantly in the front row of every class, and just like I felt like I was like watching a movie of like life and culture and just all the different stuff. And I, you know, it was hard for me to take the fine art practice class because I was so driven to the ways of talking around art. So yeah, I think it was a fundamental conversation for me as far as Cerritos, because I didn't have any friends in LA like that. I didn't really grow up like in the city enough to call it home. And I was sort of rejecting parts of my narrative at that point that I think Cerritos was kind of helping me to soothe a little bit and to like be okay. I think I always tell people too, like looking at the reflection of myself in the Zoom call, I had like short hair. I was not like, if you saw my badge from then, you wouldn't even know it was me. So it was pivotal, and I'm so happy again to be back, because thinking about it, I'm like, whoa, whoa. So yeah.
But what I think is really nice is I have this vivid memory of you coming up to me, as your professor, you coming up to me and just being so excited and saying, I'm an art history major. I love art history, and just bringing that energy. And you still have that amazing energy. Whereas like when you get older, sometimes you lose that energy. And so how do you maintain that energy and that excitement for what you're doing?
I feel pretty blessed to say, and I hope that my connection is working, but yeah, I mean, I feel like I knew, I've always known that I was in a rare position of like um, existing in a space that I hadn't seen myself. But I would also say to like the compliments to the staff, I never felt that as a student. I never felt outside of the conversation at that point. I had so much question about where I fit in, but it wasn't a response to like, you're obviously out. I just was like, I'm learning about so much, but none of this feels like my unique point of view just yet. But they were all the fundamentals. Like I still attribute to this day, so many of my favorite artists are the artists that these professors put in front of me for the first time, because I kept saying like, okay, I like this, but why do I like that? And so you guys gave me frameworks of looking and thinking and existing that was, I think my fire to this whole thing. I've stayed curious, the entire time. So
Definitely. Well, and I think you're bringing up some really important points about, where to push visual studies and our historical studies in different directions and like pushing that narrative in a different direction. And we're going to get to that.
yeah.
But I was wondering if you could also talk about your time in Dallas. So that like experience in Dallas, but also your time in Washington, D.C. at Howard. How do you feel like having those different experiences, different geographical locations, how that's helped to inform your kind of interest in art or just your experience in general?
For sure. For sure. Well, I'm super drawn to like paintings with horses in them. I don't know why, but Texas definitely took its toll on me. I like Western style artwork. But no, I kind of just I from LA moved to Texas because, as we all know, like parts of LA is like there's just it's not art supported. There was like realities that my mom wanted to protect me from, and moved us there, and only the arts kept me alive. So this kid's weird, he's cool, put him in art school. And I did that and studied art. And then I went to Howard with the same type of like curiosity. But I think at that point, coming from a school which was like kind of predominantly white for the most part, to a space where Howard definitely served me culturally. It allowed me to see like myself physically reflected in so many beautiful ways, and like having roommates from like all over the place, and also dealing with like being an art kid and being back around guys who like played sports for fun. Like I was like, they're like, I always remember like athletes always like being drawn to me because I looked like them and being amongst them, but I really had no conversation. I was like, I really only like Picasso. I don't know what sports. And just kind of like moving through all of that, I think still shows up in my art and my life, and the way I talk about art, and the way like I make accessibility in the art. I've always known to look back for the people who probably are going to act like they're shy or don't want to be here, but in their hearts of hearts, like they're having a ball. Like I just spoke directly to that person, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Briefly, specifically about Howard, we have a lot of students, a lot of African American students who are interested in HBCU colleges, universities. And so, any words of wisdom on that, like just in general, how it helped you, or
yeah,
that was the right choice for you?
Definitely. I would say there's no shame in like giving yourself a strong foundation to succeed in that environment. Meaning like if there is this sort of like use of, Cerritos College or community colleges to create a basis for your like general classes, and you go into that program knowing exactly what you want to contribute and exactly what you want to add. There's no shame in that, because I've been on the other side of that conversation where I drove directly to that conversation right out of a high school level, but I didn't have the resource and this, like when we lost my dad, it was a financial wreck. Like I had to figure out how to sustain my house. So school wasn't even an option for me at that point. So if I gave myself a bigger foundation or a platform or something like that, I would say like, yeah, also like be friends with your professors. Like these are all people that now in this seat that I'm sitting in today, I look to all of you guys and it's like, yeah, I still look up to you, but to some degree I'm like, I also understood more why you wanted me to do certain things, because it's like I've grown in maturity. So I think to some degree, it's like, yeah, be friends with these people, because like there is only going to be, it's for your betterment in the long run. And I know that like when we're in these places, we feel like no one understands us. But funny enough, it's like they do. They got it.
Oh, that's a lovely point. I mean, when we're sitting alone in our office hours and we really want students to come visit us, it's a good reminder. Yeah, come and see your professors, talk to your professors, things like that. So
Talk
we
to them.
do
Yeah.
our best to understand. Can you talk about how your art history classes prepared you for the art world, but also kind of what you needed to learn to start entering that space where you're thinking about curatorial practices or exhibitions? Could you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. And I would have to say, like, that was not an easy climb. There was never like a left Cerritos and became a curator. It was definitely like I and Andre, professor. See, now I get to say first name basis. I was like, I'm from Texas, and that wasn't allowed at one point. But no, I'm kidding. But she was the first person to tell me to go work professionally in the field at the Broad when I was taking a class. I don't even remember. Was it oil? I think it was I always tell the story, the infamous oil
It
painting
was
class.
just like straight up beginning drawing.
Okay. Because I remember taking one practice class like 5 times because I just didn't. I was like, I don't want to leave. But no, I remember you saying like go work for this institution, and I did apply. I did take the risk to do so. I worked at the Broad, and I had to take a front of house staff, and that was what it was available to me at the time. But I was looking to work for an institution that has so many blurry lines. There wasn't necessarily like a definition for the role just yet. Eli and his wife created this new collection. They had a collection they already had, but they created this new conversation around it. And with all the spontaneity that you see about me today, I broke through so many of the barriers of what that space was. But at the same time, it was I had to make strong choices. There's many nights that I said, I feel erased out of this. I don't feel enough. So I kept applying. I applied myself for internships, and I applied myself for many of them that I didn't get. I applied myself for many that I did get, like the American Alliance of Museums was one that changed my life, being able to go into spaces and see what the larger conversations were, and finding out that I do have a lot to add. It changed my life. But like I said, and I mean this not to talk you guys' heads off, that was a choice, and I had to continue to make them over and over again. Like there wasn't like a smooth sailing thing, It looks easy now, but it wasn't,
Yeah. So, I mean, AJ, we were talking about this, that maybe the way people see your trajectory is like a very smooth upward climb where everything's going great. But obviously in the real world, there's hills and valleys, right? There's ups and downs. And so could you talk a little bit about that? Like, how did you get through some of those challenges?
Oh man.
But also like enjoy those successes to carry you forward?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's seen me smile, I'd say, has also seen me cry. There has never been like, I'm not picking and choosing parts of my personality for social media. I was really affected last year or the year before last with the uprisings that were happening. I felt very distraught as a Black man. I felt very distraught as a young Black man. I felt very distraught as a young Black man in the art world, which felt like such. At that point, I created this tradition or culture around like accessibility and welcome. And I felt like every institution in LA sort of put like a zipper. No one said anything. They're saying, we're going to stand still and see what happens. And I was like, whoa, where do we go? There's no physical space for us to go. And so I think if you look at my first project, my first curatorial project, hopefully you'll see a lot of the traces of like, I created something to send people where to go. It's like, it was a habitat that I was most interested in building because I had experienced safety in art spaces, and then I saw that it was gone and I wanted to put it back. That was my addition. And that comes from you guys, right? Like there are actual moments in my life where I had people give me books, give me access to information, talk to me as if I mattered. That was a part of why I was able to do it for others, I think.
And your experiences at the Broad, to go back a little bit, your experience at the Broad and also at the California African American Museum and at the Underground Museum, are there specific experiences there that you feel really shaped you? I mean, obviously the Broad was like a foot in the door, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Also, so like ups and downs there, but
I mean, yeah, I definitely don't want to talk anyone's heads off, but if I always like, I humor myself, I break myself. I make fun of myself first before anyone else does. And I say, even my haircut, that was such a Basquiat cosplay because that's who I adore. That was like the first person that looked like me, sound like me. I wanted in. And so, at the Pro, like there was this uniform of all black, standing next to you couldn't get me away from his work. I literally wanted to live next to it. Anyone that felt like a part of my community, it was like show and tell every day. Like, I have to tell you about why this man is important to me. And that really is kind of like the underlying of like the tour thing that happened for me, where I started to give out these like tours to more notable people, which then became collectors for me, which then became all this conversation, because leaving there, going to the Underground Museum, finding out about heroes like Noah Davis, which was for me a similar moment where like a younger Black male art thinker who has died, Basquiat at 27, Noah at 32, very young age, but leaving so much impression for the world to like unpack. And as I started getting closer and closer to these age groups, I was like, whoa, it felt like there was a journey and there was some steps that I was allowed to like skip because of their humble, like, creation of spaces and thoughts. And like Basquiat being such an acclaimed artist, and Noah having so much progression in his thinking, then it was like, for me, it was like humbly recognizing like I had responsibility. I wasn't just like I couldn't just keep floating through these spaces. So yeah, when Jeffrey offered me that opportunity, and we met just at a dinner, I had to get to some critical thinking, and I don't want to go too far in the conversation, but I'll say this: I had a choice. Power could have been like an individual pursuit. I always say this to people, especially young people. I could have like worried about my seat at the table, but I thought clever enough, as well as my co-curator, to say power was really horizontal. How many people, as I always come back to this quote, can we positively affect today? Whether that was like my creative friends who had a lot of stuff to paint and to say, but nowhere to show it because the ways of the art world was so one at a time, or really breaking this educational thing down and saying like every guest that comes into the space will be treated with the hello. We'll have a full-blown tour if they want it, even if they don't want it. Sometimes I'm gonna explain to you what this painting means, because I sat by it during the pandemic. It was the only thing keeping all of us going. And then also helping my artist friends to realize like once you put it out there, the community is going to respond to it in a very different way. And I don't think any of us saw that success coming, to be quite honest. Sorry if I rushed ahead. Don't talk to me about art. I won't shut up.
Oh, you're hitting on a lot of really important points, so that's great. I have like 20 questions now, but
okay.
About working with Jeffrey Deutsch. So you're kind of saying like working within that existing framework of like a really strong gallery, but he like gave you that platform to present what you wanted and to work with your co-curator to create a vision that you felt really proud of, it sounds like, or really excited about.
Yeah, it was an introductory conversation. And I think, my co-curator, to be more transparent, she's also the director of the space. So she had already worked for the gallery, and Jeffrey actually offered her a show originally. He was allowing his staff to kind of come up with things, and she was a fan of what I had been saying on social media platforms and just working at these spaces and stuff like that. So she tapped me in. And I'll be honest with everybody, that was my first show. There was a moment in the show where I thought I have to get Kerry James Marshall and Andy Warhol and all these other artists that I thought were the artists to be in the show, not realizing that I had no access to any of that. That's not how it works. So I had to work with the artists that were in my community. But I will say, like, Jeffrey did step back, and gave us the platform to at least work within our own conversations. And it was like a thing of her friends, my friends. I'll be honest, guys, like, to really show you how important the journey is, one of the artists in my show, Amani, he had actually worked at a museum, the Glenstone Art Museum, because I was so passionate about art. I took vacations to go look at museums. I met this person as they were the front house staff at the Glenstone Art Museum, and we just had a conversation and we kept in touch. And then when it was a time to say, who are your artist friends that deserve to show, this is who I thought about, and I put this person into the play. At that time, they had already changed their life trajectory. They are also worth showing art. But just to say, so many. I mean, literally, one of my friends from Cerritos College who sat by me in class all the time, it was like 5 art history majors. So the other one, she needed a job, and I remember when I was starting to become more successful at the Broad, and they needed more people. I was like, well, what about my friend from Cerritos? And I got her in the door, and hopefully she's still in the world making some noise. But just to say, like, community has always been my drive for this art world, you know. Did I
Yeah.
talk a lot again? Okay, cool. Help me come back, guys.
You made it really easy and wonderful.
Okay,
But
cool.
so the exhibition we're talking about, for those who maybe don't know about it, is this Shattered Glass exhibition that was at Jeffrey Deutsch. And so, and we were talking about your co-curator, he said is the director of the gallery. So you were talking about some of the artists you brought into the show. And can you talk about some of the goals of the show? Because you were dealing with some really important themes, but at the same time, when I would read about people going to the show, or I would see video, I was just watching some videos about it, and people talk about like joy and community and like the sense of happiness being in there. So even though there's some like difficult themes, there's kind of this overarching feeling of like happiness with this exhibition. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you're gonna make me cry because I think about how the duality or the binary of that, it's like such a thin line between like being extremely happy and being extremely distraught. You know, because we were distraught the year before, it was like fertile ground for this conversation to happen. And we didn't plan this in a billion years. I kid you not. We kept getting the show pushed back due to the pandemic. People thought I was throwing a virtual reality show. They were like, "Is this a online show?" Because there was like the case numbers were rising. We couldn't give a definitive artist to the dates to the artists. It's like when the show is going to open. And whatever the higher power moving force is, we opened the show up on the first day of spring, which, like, heart eye emoji, we seeing so many people take the risk to come out of their homes when we hadn't seen each other for such a long time, to stand in line for their favorite artist friend or their cousin, or all these artists, 40 artists had their own trajectory into Jeffrey's gallery space. It wasn't the AJ show. It was literally like all of these stories, all of our parents, all of our community. I reconnected with my professors there that gave me my go into the conversation. So, you know, I say that to say tears were shed because the joy that exuded from that was like a pride. Finally, this sort of like, and you know, that's why I was trying to say, like, I had a tough job because Jeffrey Deutsch's gallery exists with its own history, and gallery spaces as a whole exist with its own history. So it was a very bold curatorial practice move, I think, to sort of notion to this idea of like destroying the thing that I'm standing inside of. But to be honest, that was what I felt as I started to think, this seat at the table, this role, this one of you at a time. I was like, if I can only get close enough to this power structure, David and Goliath fashion, I'm going to throw the rock. I'm going to throw the rock and I'm going to shatter, I'm going to break it, and I'm going to let everyone in. And then what happened was like joy. You know what I mean? And what happened was togetherness. And I always tell people, as the show started to inch towards closing, it was really like, okay, this can't last forever. Now it's a mode of thinking. Where do we want to go after this? And that's kind of been where my curatorial practice has been leading myself to lately. It's like listening and absorbing, being amongst people, not being stuffy and academic. Even though I love academia, I read books every day and stuff like that. It's really just about like accessibility.
Sure.
Some young kid is going to tell me what my next art show is. I swear, I always say that. Some kids on the show, somebody's going to tell me what they want to see, and then I'm going to go try my best to give it to that person, you know? So anyways, I love this conversation. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, and I mean, another thing that stood out to me when you were talking about how people were coming to the show despite the pandemic, they're waiting, they're crowding in, they want to see things. And that people came back again and again, that there were like repeated visits. And what I hear a lot from my students is when I take them to museums, they'll say like, oh, it doesn't feel like I belong there. Like it feels like it's not a space for me. It's like for older people, or it's not comfortable for me to bring like a young cousin or my child or something like that. And so I guess thinking about how to create spaces that are inviting, art spaces that are inviting and bring people in. And so could you talk about how you tried to do that with the gallery exhibition, or why you think that gallery exhibition felt inviting to people?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I am not a crybaby, but this conversation is really full circle. It's so full circle for me because it's like I felt that way, and I remember feeling that way, and I remember feeling like art, like even the books. Like if you look at my life now, like I have so many art books, it's because I remember when I couldn't afford them, and that felt over my head. And so every time somebody gave me access to a little bit of money, I would go buy books, and I was so adamant about making sure people knew that there was times like professors, I think you guys would show like we try our best, we show the canon, and then we show revisionist artists or additional artists, and I always nabbed onto those artists like the Wilfredo Lambs and stuff like that. I was like, wait, I want more. No, I really want to own their books. No, I really want to like know who this person's full narrative is, so it's not a sentence, it's not a bleep in this conversation. And so I think, yeah, as I really think about why all this was so important, because I've seen the articles, and I actually, to be honest, I was upset about how the ways of publicizing that show went about. We didn't get the LA Times until after the New York Times, and the New York Times basically got a lot of the stuff kind of like not wrong, but it was sort of framed to say like the success of the show was because so many people came back over and over and over again, almost ignoring the fact that the success of the show was because no one had access to this conversation.
Mhm.
So like, yeah, they naturally would come back because they said, if I don't come back now, when am I going to see it again? So it kind of shifts the responsibility from so many people who are already in the field onto these like young artists, and I myself included, which, to be quite honest, like the month after the show fell, there was a huge cloud of depression over so many of our heads because we were like, I mean, in some degree, it was like, whoa, oh my God, like it happened. But then the other part of that was like, studio visits started to become super hectic for my artist friends. Everybody wanted to collect. You could see how stressed they were. When someone falls in love with one image of yours, then that's the only thing they ever want you to produce. And so they started to feel shifted. As a thinker, I think a lot of places started to feel a little bit ruffled by my presence in them, because it's like, okay, he's trying to change something. And those funnels and those channels to power worked really well for years. So me kind of expanding the table that quickly was something that I had to make choice on. And that's where I'm at now in my life, where it's like, I'm not going to turn around. We can't turn around. We have to just keep going. And it looks like cherries and stuff on Instagram. And I have to be honest, a lot of why I flower the conversations, because this thing can get really dark and ugly when you really, really want to be inside of something that has proven to you over and over again that you're not of the fitting conversation. That's the necessary shatter glass effect, right? Like something has to flip, a table, a conversation. And to be honest, I've only done a fraction of the work, like, yeah, there's focus on artists of color, but I've cried tears with my mom about how as women, there's still this notion of like, you can only be a mom or a wife for one particular role. I've cried tears of, I mean, we could do this all day. There's so many, and we know problematics of the art. We've seen it, So don't get me started. Cerritos College.
Trying to drive change. I think you bring up some really important words about like trying to drive change. You're going to hit some resistance. And then also that idea of opening the show and like the high highs of the show, and then bring like it coming down, obviously that's, you feel like you're making such progress with having the exhibition up, and then to have it come down, I feel like would be challenging. But you're continuing your important work. You're not done. You're doing more.
No.
So, I mean, do you want to talk a little about what you're doing now? You just came back from Boston, and you said you're heading to Chicago. Do you want to talk about some of the work you're doing now and some of the student groups you're working with, that kind of thing?
Yeah. And I say the work is, it's just really kind of like, that's what my thing is with the Jeffrey Deutsch or the Blue Chip Gallery. It was an existing space to host the conversation, but I think the conversation is much more important than a particular, I love Jeffrey's space, whatever, just for like PC conversation, but it really can happen wherever we're gathered. This is a total amazing space to have this type of conversation. And I never saw one more important than the other. So yeah, I've been working with, I mean, if you ask me to show up and you're interested in the conversation, that's my work ethic. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to keep doing it because I appreciate this position that I've built for myself for platform, So yeah, I just came back from Boston. I took some kids from Harvard's campus to go look at the Boston ICLA or ICA, I'm sorry. And art accessibility is like my thing. I'm going to go to Chicago next week to open up a show that similar energies to Shattered Glass a little bit. And then in the far end of the year, we're going to go to Miami, Basel. So the show was going to step out as what Jeffrey saw was his highest show this year. So there's a lot of praise there. And then you guys can hear this, but in March, our year anniversary, we're going to celebrate it with the text. So I'm going to have a book, and we're going to have a book over the show. Yeah. And thank you. No one understands that that's the real win, because I feel like, it's not about like us today, but like I think about the kid not born yet, or the kid who hasn't even arrived at Cerritos College yet. For that person to have access to a singular conversation on the shelf that answers so many questions for them, I am so overwhelmed with joy to be able to step into that, and do it for them.
Like a permanence for the exhibition in some ways, so it can live on.
My headphones died, so I had to switch, but hopefully you can still hear me.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. And I agree. And I also say too, like, just to say something that's kind of corny, but always felt relevant to me in my social economic status, we can't all afford these paintings that are on the walls of these places. And that's okay, but we can afford, hopefully, the $65 book or the $40 whatever, or, when it gets down to Amazon, the $5.25 version of it, whatever. I have so many used art books on my shelf, but like accessibility is the thing. And I'm just like, that's what I was like, okay, we made it. Like my friends are going to be contextualized. You know what I mean? Like that's where it's at. So yeah, I'll be hitting you up for proofreading. Not much has changed. I still.
I owe you for doing this, AJ. I was just thinking about the exhibition, and then I'm going to let other people ask questions, but just think about putting on a show with 40 artists. I mean, that's a big place to start. You said this was your first or one of your first exhibitions. Like, how did you manage such a large group and kind of try to bring it all together?
You know what? Even though it drove us crazy, I think back thinking about the show, it was so necessary. And I wish we could have done a wider table, because I knew at that point that entry was so like, there was like a one-shot thing at this, like we really don't know what the result of this is. And I say that to say, like, we included video, we included sculpture. With the sculpture works in particular, I really wanted to make a point around hinting at other ways of looking at the accessibility in art. Like I'll say this, like every sculptor in that show, Lauren Halsey, D. Alvarado, who actually used to work with me at the Brogue, she was on the prep team. So just coming back to relationships, and I love I learned a lot about prep. Like she was always saying hello to me in the hallway. And like, here we are 5 years later and we're showing together. But I say that to say, like, we elevated female sculptors so that there was this, or female identifying sculptors, so that there was this reality of like, who's actually birthing this room? Like, who's like making us feel human in this? Like, because paintings do a great job, but like sculptors, if you've been in front of one that looks like you, can really change your like life, like it really makes you feel seen. And then we complemented it with video work, but like, obviously it can't do everything. So like, I want to do everything, but we can't do everything. But yeah, 40 was a lot. We still laugh at that. It was like, we're a community now though. Like, and you'll see like artists hanging out with each other, and like, it's like, yeah.
Well, and it sounds like you built a really wonderful network, right? So, I mean, you're talking about people you met at other art institutions, but then like this network of artists that you worked with as well. So now you've like really created a space for yourself, which is amazing.
You'd be so surprised that artists with the hugest followings and stuff like that are the most antisocial. They're so scared to talk to other people because they're afraid to be judged. They have the same, I mean, literally my life is the art department. Like they have the same feelings, but if you get that trust bond in, it's like, hey, can I show you my next painting? And that's how I know when someone likes me, when they're showing me stuff that is not like done yet or making the net. So yeah, we're like art school kids and we stuck together, so.
AJ, did you have some images to show us, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare myself.
Why don't we take some questions, and then maybe if you want to bring something up on the screen, or I can bring something up.
I'm gonna mute myself then while I listen to the.
But why don't we have some questions? Anyone have any questions?
I have a question. I couldn't find my little hand raising emoji fast enough. I feel like it's not one of my options today. Hi, AJ.
Hey,
I
I respect you.
have a question kind of to follow up what you were just talking about in terms of kind of dealing with this large group of people. One of the things I was really blown away with at the show was just how together everything was. Everything was kind of brought to the same level of finished. It was all like museum ready type of work. And with so many people, with so many different levels of, you know, having been recognized before, you know, you have some artists that are museum artists, and then you have some that maybe haven't shown in a gallery like that before. And I'm wondering how that went, like as the curator, like how much of your job was kind of corralling everybody to make sure that they were feeling confident and on point enough to take the work to the level it needed to be at, because so much of that work was dated 2021, you know, so it wasn't like work they've been working on for years and years. It's just it. And so I'm just kind of curious what you have to say about that.
No, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I hope the word is equity. Like I keep coming back to equity. I think about that picture where it's like all the kids are trying to look over the gate, and like one of them has a higher stepping stool than the other.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like I think about that, and in no degree am I making comment about whose work is better or not, but I did want it to be a seamless like finish line. So knowing that I had artists who knew how to run the race of galleries and marathons and things like that already, if you look at the certain positioning in the show, there was moments where I tried to highlight that, whether it was like giving someone like the back wall or putting someone next to someone who just like, you don't know that name, but you knew this name. Like I'm an overthinker and I just applied it there. That's where I was very intentional about creating change, because I did not want this to be about you come in and I've seen it. I used to give tours. It's almost like points. Like you're like, I know this, I know that, I know this, I know that. I know art. I wanted to confuse my viewers. I also wanted to lure in the art world that thought they knew everything. So I just want to make a mention to someone, not to be specific, but like Lauren Halsey is a friend of mine who is also a community college like graduate or, you know, alumni. She was one of the ones that I knew if I put her in the middle of the room, because everybody wants to be around the Made in LA, the Hammer, the Kordansky solo show, the super successful Lauren Halsey, we created a 360 rotunda like work. She did a sculpture that everybody's work was tied into. That was a game of blurring the lines of like importance or not, you know, like if I can look at Lauren Halsey's work and also see this artist over here that no one's ever seen before, who has 500 followers on Instagram, whatever, you know, that's the job of like community building and community love. But, you know, the other side of that was like, I listened to every one of their stories, even the ones who had it already made in the bag. And I heard them say things like what my lowest nights look like. And I positioned them next to someone who had a similar story. You know, like the Perez brothers were two people who, when I first met them, we always tell the story, it's a public information thing. They were looking to win a Red Bull grant for $1,200. And then their painting in the show, needs to say, went for a lot much more than that. But like, I sat them next to someone who has already, you know, been in the field for forever. So it was just really like having care for people and knowing what they needed and knowing what their careers needed too. And then also having no regret. No regret. I did a lot of things a lot of curators wouldn't do. So thank you for that. So much love for you. She's an amazing person.
Other questions?
I don't bite, but I appreciate it. Hey, Rebecca.
Hey. Am I up? I just want to say, AJ, I'm so proud of you. Everything that you've done, the way that you've invested yourself in these institutions and taken them apart is just lovely. It's beautiful. And I'm curious to hear more about the work that you've been doing at the Underground Museum.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I mean, it seems like the focus there has been on community, right? Like even in the mission statement of the institution is community building. So how did that prepare you for what you're doing now?
Yeah, thank you for that. And great question, because I feel like it's one of those things when I come back to like responsibilities that I have after better learning what the underground museum's really foundational story is. And I would say it's not necessarily yet common knowledge. Like, it's not a museum that started like the MoCA, where it's like city museum and there's a money and there's board and people pay every year to sustain it. This is essentially a dream of a couple who put their all into it. Noah Davis, the husband of the couple, put his entire inheritance into that. And that entire drive for him was like a kid like me, right? Like, why should AJ, these of the world, have to go to the bro to get a Basquiat when he lives in West Adams, you know? So like, he made a accessibility route possible working with these museums like MoCA. And you'll see trajectories of that where like Mark Bradford's space is in conversation with the Hammer or whoever. Like, there's like all these like give back satellite spaces that are happening. But I always like to take the dust off the Underground Museum's relationship to MoCA by saying like they were already initiated as a museum, but there's a relationship that sustained. But that knowing of all that story was so important for me to go, what is community building? Noah Davis is one of my favorite thinkers. Like, I remember you gave me so many people to put in my pocket on this journey, like in my knapsack of like art history. You just guys fill me up with names. And once I learned about Noah, I kind of learned how to read the stars differently. You know, he was a man who talked from the grave. You guys got to do your research, like Google him or like look him up. We can talk on it too offline. There's just some phenomena, you know? So to be quite honest, that's how I met Jeffrey. Noah Davis's wife, Karan, took me to Jeffrey's dinner and introduced me to the team. And then due to the pandemic, things shifted and I needed to, I as well felt distraught. I didn't have anywhere to go. So when Jeffrey asked me to do this show, I took it up. And I never intended to be a gallery superstar. You know, that's like the byproduct. I just wanted to tell a really important story, you know? Does this work? Does that work? Okay.
Yeah, I love, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, James.
Well, I just wanted to say, I love the way that you and Lauren and everyone kind of around that community has been invested in the idea of mutual aid, right? It's at a time when that's so essential to sort of keeping everyone afloat. Yeah. And that it's been ingested and kind of digested by this art community that is using that as a strategy. I love it. So
yeah, people always mistake me and Lauren for like family. They think we're like related. It's because there's like no, like, I mean, our philosophy around this is so similar. And I think I only say that to say like her inclusion even in a show like Shattered Glass, where I was seen as like such a newbie curator, that would not have happened if we didn't have relationship and mutual respect for each other, because she was working with the gallery that's not the same as the one we hosted the show at. And so really you don't see stuff like that happen. And I always tell this story. Jeffrey, actually, when I first suggested her, he was like, good luck. She's like the hottest artist in LA. You can't get her in a show. And I was like, I'm going to text her. And I texted her and I was like, hey, Lauren, like, I can't do my first show without you. And then she's like, of course, AJ. So I mean that to say, seriously, guys, like, keep your networks and your communities, keep those relationships, because you really don't know how that's going to, and I hope I don't sound old by saying that, but it really does. Oh, it's okay though. But I really think it fulfills you. It will get you further, you know, than trying to go individually.
Thanks, AJ. We have a great question from Nikki Jones asking, what memorable responses have you had to your work, and when will the book be available for purchase?
So the book's going to be dropping in March, because the show opened in March. So it'll be next year. Right now we're doing like interviews with the artists, and honestly, we work a lot of jobs. They're getting ready for Miami Basel. So they're all like creating new buildings, and we're going to be showing, hopefully, I think in the Moore building. So it's like a lot of stuff going on. It's like a huge building, but memorable response. I mean, people cried. People cried in the midst of the show. I cried in the show. I have no shame. We cried tears of joy. I think one of the more memorable moments though was seeing a young woman who actually, Marjani Merriweather is a sculptor from Baltimore. She focuses on a lot of like sculptures that have like untraditional use of hair. there was a young woman whose hairstyle was the exact same as the sculpture. And she walked in and she very loudly, with no shame, said, that painting, that sculpture looks like, that art looks like me. And the entire gallery got chills because what, like we're doing it. And this little child shouldn't be like crippled by the art world's like, you know, evilness and how much she can't afford the piece, whatever, but that's a moment, you know, and I can't say if we didn't take the risk we took, like she would have had access to that reflection that day, you know? So that was probably my most memorable one, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just have that opportunity to connect with the art is so important.
I have a photo of it, but I can't find it, but it's a moment, guys.
I was going to put, can I put up an image from the New York Times article that I found that includes the Lauren Halsey sculpture?
Yeah.
Does that work? Can you see
Yes.
that?
So literally, like, I'm so glad. Thank you for this, because like everything about this was so arranged in a way so that you felt there was like notions of art history showing up even with this brand new work. If you're looking at the painting where my friends are like looking at the nude heavyset art, that is the body of the artist that made that. That's her being bare in the moment. And I romantically want to make the arc of that room sort of speak to like the beauty of like more European style like architecture and like these like muses moment. And so we put that there so that it wasn't placed in a space of shame, but more so this adoration of her confidence. And by, you know, really doing that, I think it highlighted what Keziah most wanted to be known for. It was like, she does not deserve, and I always say this over her works, is like, is obviously very different than what your eye has taught you about art. But you know what it was? Ways of seeing, or was it seeing? I think I read that in Traeger's class, John Berger, that was like something we wanted to deconstruct, you know? Why is Keziah's work strange to you? You know, so.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Anything else you'd like to point out?
The entire thing, I mean, Mr. Wash was like our oldest artist, if we're gonna make jest of like what age is and how much that doesn't matter. Our oldest artist in the show was a man who was falsely incarcerated in jail and was sentenced to a lifetime in jail. A lot of the works that he produces, he made while serving his sentence. He had been there for 21 years. And now he actually won Made in LA. He won the Hammers sort of like biennial of what the city's best artists are or whatever, you know? And so we juxtaposed him next to the youngest male artist in the show, Tyler Bellan, who is 21 years old. And we tried to make mention of how fleeting life is and sometimes how these opportunities, you know, in the artist himself took it back when I told him like, yeah, we sat you next to him to pay honor to the fact that for 21 years of your life, you were put in a cage, and so many people in our community are often. So this was not a show around like, I respect and adore the canon and the master narrative, but that was never my aim. It was never my goal.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think that's great. I think that's something we're working on changing in our own programs at Cerritos.
Oh,
so
sure,
you're helping to inspire us.
No.
Any other questions? Anything else in the chat, or just unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
This is Nikki. I guess I'll talk instead of texting, but I wanted to say, I know I was the one that asked about when the book would be out. Since it's not going to be out until next year, how do we get it and know that it's available for purchase?
Well, I'm definitely super active on social media, but the gallery itself will be, we're going to make a whole like moment. It's not going to be something where it's like limited 2 copies at all. Yeah, we're hoping to make this like exist. We're raising enough money and stuff now so that it exists in like your Barnes and Nobles and you're like, whatever. It's not going to be like locally kept. We're going to, you know, Jeffrey's to his benefit, he's a big powerhouse in that. So we're definitely using those resources to make sure that this is like, hopefully is, you know, I can't say it's a canonizing show like Soul of a Nation or something like that, but for some young kids, I think we did really well with like, you know, what we had. And thank you for asking that question, Nikki, because I really, I definitely want you to get it. So yeah.
And it'll be called Shattered Glass. The text will be called that.
Yeah, we're gonna just name it for the show and probably give better visuals to like the protesting and all the parts that I was trying to explain about the essences of the show. Like also too, I want to say one of the things I've been really pressing for in the meetings about the book is to make it about how the community responded to the show. So we're going to try some of the different strategies where we're not excluding Instagram and social media. We actually want to make a collage of all the people were literally surprising me with like dedicated captions to like how this thing made them feel. And I saved them, and the artists, we would share them amongst ourselves, and it's like, whoa, like this thing shifted when people got a hold of it with all of where they felt in the world, you know? So we want to make a couple pages just dedicated to that. And like that moment I talked about with the little girl looking at the art, her mom let me take a picture and she gave me permission, like that'll be in the book, you know, like we're going to try to elevate our parents. So many of us are like working class people. And so we want to talk about like that. So, you know, Cerritos College will definitely be mentioned in the book.
Yeah.
Lisa, can I
bringing social media into a publication and into the reception of an art exhibition, because I think art, you know, it's so elite, quote unquote.
Yeah, you know.
We don't think about social media, but in reality, social media is incredibly important for galleries and for museums, and they put a lot of money towards it. So I think that sounds really cool to think about people's reactions to the show and using social
I had $1 a day for how many people asked me about NFT. I'd be able to painting.
No, NFT. No, but speaking of social media, you are very active. And so if people want to follow you, they can find you at.
Yeah, it's just my name. I try to be super simple. And I should also say, like, full clarity, like I've started to get a little bit of different responses to there. So I've been also giving myself a little bit of a break from the performative nature of social media. So this is one way to find me, but I try my best to be like a human and accessible. You're more than likely to find me at an art opening or something like that. Guarantee you I'll try my best to be there. But I just say that to say I don't want people in the past, people have like tried to find me there, and it takes me a couple of days lag to like get back to the conversation because it's overwhelming. You know, I'm starting to stand in a position where like a lot of people see change in my voice, and it's hard for me because I'm still a young man and I'm figuring things out, you know. So just wanted to preface that. But yeah, I'll put it in the chat for everyone who needs it. But no pressure. You don't have to follow me.
We have a great question from Julia, who's asking, do you envision yourself curating another show soon, or like yourself like being a curator at a museum? What do you want to do, AJ, as you move on?
I definitely will say yes. So this year I'll be like I have another one opening next week, but really where I want to end this thing off with, I think anyways, is owning my own gallery or working in conversation with other people like a Lauren Halsey to create an extremely accessible, like an underground museum, like paying tribute to spaces like that and making more of those so that no one has to do that work alone. And like my favorite spaces, you know, Jam, just above Midtown, and all these places, traditionally these gallery spaces can only last for so long because the financial burdens of holding up a museum are strong. So I'm trying to use my moment in the shine of the gallery life to save money and to open up my own gallery one day, you know.
Wonderful.
Accessible routes. I thought one of my friends was one of our friends in the chat was gonna ask, but I think he may have backed out. Is there a question there?
No, but is there a question you were predicting was going to come that you'd like to answer?
No, I thought there was a guy who said like, hey, can I say something? But then I think I started talking. Did I make that up? He's not here anymore.
No, I think it was Sergio. But
okay, cool.
Oh, Sergio, is there anything you'd like to say?
I think he teaches at 7.
Oh. Sorry, I talked too much.
No, it's.
Well, AJ, are there? Oh, hi, Rosalinda. Yeah. Rosalinda.
Sorry, it's more of a comment. I just want to say like thank you for like, you know, sharing your story. And I just started like during the pandemic virtually, and I can already see like how Cerritos, like the communities is very strong, especially with the professors. And I don't know, I'm really thankful, you know, I don't know, for like spaces like this, you know, like professors holding space for like even alumni, like it's pretty like really dope to see like, alumni coming back and like just doing like a full circle. And I don't know, it's exciting like to see your work, like all the work that you've done and, the power of community. Like it makes me like, like it makes my heart like feel so good, like that, like you're just taking everyone with you, along your journey. And just I've always like think accessibility, I know you mentioned that a lot, and like that's super important for me as well, like in the art world. And I don't know, I'm just really excited like to continue my journey, and I'm hoping to become like a high school like art teacher. And I'm just like I'm just excited to learn more. And thank you so much for sharing, and holding space for us today.
No worries. Honestly, was like just in awe listening to you, because your affirmational like head nods and smiles throughout this whole thing was like, I saw a lot of myself in you, because that's when you look at the professor. I was in the front row of their classes, like with these big beaming eyes. And I think you should follow that excitement, because there's really something there for sure. Like if you, instead of like always loading ourselves with what's wrong with our lives, like if we just take the chance on what feels right about it, you might be making the world, you know what I mean? And that's why I'm such in awe of my journey, because like I only trusted that feel good moment, and I deflected a lot of what the noise was. And now I look up and it's a reality. Shattered glass, it exists. The conversation is out there. So thank you. Thank you.
Rosalinda, maybe you'll be back here in a few years. So.
And it's funny because like I started my journey with Professor Bersiglieri, that I think she's still here. And like, I don't know, she got me really excited, about things.
That's wonderful.
Really good. They have like a little like, here's the nest and here's how you get out of it. And so
right.
Well, AJ, we're coming up on an hour. So are there any final words of wisdom or any final ideas you'd like to share with the group? We do have a message from Sergio Turan.
I saw that.
Congratulations and continued success. And he's so excited. And a message from Imelda as well. And she's thanking you.
All I'll say, there's definitely no word of advice, because I'm not ahead of you. I'm standing in this beside you. I am so grateful to be able to be like positioned to have a voice and to use a voice, but just super recognizing that like everything and every experience that you're taking right now is literally what you're putting in your knapsack, and it's a choice. When it's time to make the choice, that determines who you are. So I don't think that I'm better or worse than any of you all. I just think that I've been in enough positions to know like all of us making it is the best route at it, because I don't want to do this alone. And I don't want to be positioned to speak for everybody. So thank you for giving me the space to actualize my narrative today. So yeah. Oh, look at these messages. Oh, the chat always does this thing where the chat really kind of tells you what people really feel.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
AJ.
Hey,
AJ.
What's up?
Thank you for your kindness and generosity. Big love to you, my man. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great.
Well, thank you to you, AJ. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And again, please follow AJ if you're interested in kind of his continued projects, and just keep an eye out for the wonderful things that he's working on. And we look forward to having you join maybe another alumni event in the coming weeks. Matthew, is there anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, AJ and Lisa, both. This has been a fantastic event. It's been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you both and everyone who came on tonight. And thank you very much for making this an incredible evening. I've learned so much that this was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our community, for sure. I appreciate you so much.